Hello, I'm Hope Logan. I am an actor on Bold and the Beautiful, and many people really love both me and our Bold and the Beautiful drama. So I've come here to share updates about my beloved Bold and the Beautiful. Everyone, please subscribe and support me. If you do, I will keep coming every day with new updates for you. The battle lines inside the Bold and the Beautiful were already beginning to crack beneath the surface, but now the tensions surrounding Brooke Logan threatened to explode into something far more dangerous than another ordinary family feud. What started as frustration over hope for the future being shelved was rapidly evolving into a full-scale power struggle inside Forrester Creations, and Brooke was standing right at the center of it with ambition burning in her eyes. Across town, Katie Logan was busy building momentum for her own company, Logan, desperately trying to secure a future strong enough to survive after Eric Forrester delivered what appeared to be a one-and-done couture triumph. The atmosphere surrounding the Logan sisters suddenly felt less like family and more like rivals circling each other in silence, each one pretending their motives were noble while revenge simmered underneath everything they said. There was resentment buried beneath every smile, insecurity hidden behind every conversation, and the deeper this situation became, the clearer it was that none of this was really just about business anymore. It was about pride, jealousy, old wounds, and years of unresolved bitterness finally clawing its way back to the surface. And at the center of it all stood Brooke, quietly preparing to make a move that could shake the entire foundation of the Forrester empire. Meanwhile, Katie was already planting seeds of her own, hoping to lure Hope Logan away from Forrester and into the growing Logan brand. Even though Hope was not a designer herself, Katie understood exactly how valuable Hope's name and reputation were in the fashion world, especially with the financial backing of Bill Spencer standing behind them. With Bill's money and Hope's industry status, finding elite designers would never be a problem. And there was even the possibility that Zende Forrester might follow Hope out the door after becoming furious over hope for the future being pushed aside. But while all of this maneuvering was happening quietly behind closed doors, Brooke remained completely unaware that Liam Spencer was also trying to convince Hope to abandon Forrester and come work at Spencer instead. And if Brooke ever discovered that Liam was interfering in the situation, the fallout would be explosive. Yet, instead of calmly accepting the consequences of Hope destabilizing the company and manipulating her own mother into grabbing power away from Steffi Forrester, Brooke was already taking dangerous steps of her own. She approached Ridge Forrester with a proposal that sounded less like a discussion and more like the beginning of a coup. Brooke insisted that the two of them should run Forrester Creations together, reminding Ridge of all the years she had devoted to the company and pointing out that she had worked there longer than Steffi had even been alive. But the moment carried an uncomfortable undertone because Brooke's argument wasn't rooted in stability or leadership. It felt personal, emotional, and manipulative, especially considering the long history of Brooke using seduction and emotional leverage to get what she wanted. As Brooke leaned into Ridge with confidence, insisting she did not want to put him in a difficult position, the irony of her words practically hung in the air, because that was exactly what she was doing. She framed the situation as though the only real change would be that she would no longer answer to Steffi, casually suggesting instead that Steffi would answer to them. But everyone involved understood the truth was far more complicated than Brooke wanted to admit. If Brooke became co-CEO, Hope would almost certainly use that victory to humiliate Steffi at every opportunity, just like she had during the brief period when she and Carter Walton temporarily seized control of Forrester Creations. The tension between Hope and Steffi had already become deeply toxic, fueled by revenge, resentment, and wounded pride. And now Brooke was unknowingly adding gasoline to a fire that was already burning out of control. At this point, Hope's desperation for vindication had become so overwhelming that she seemed willing to risk even Brooke's marriage to Ridge if it meant getting what she wanted. The pain of having hope for the future shelved and being laughed at by Steffi had settled inside Hope like poison, slowly transforming her frustration into obsession. And while Steffi's cruelty had certainly crossed a line, Hope's response was becoming increasingly reckless. What made the situation even more dangerous was that Brooke could no longer see the difference between protecting her daughter and enabling her destructive behavior. But revenge was not only consuming Hope. Katie herself admitted that her desire to recruit Hope to Logan was fueled by more than just business ambition. During a revealing conversation with Donna Logan, Katie openly acknowledged that while bringing Hope into Logan would absolutely help the company succeed, there was another emotional layer driving her decisions. When Donna asked whether Katie also wanted revenge after Brooke repeatedly stole Bill away from her over the years, Katie did not deny it. Instead, she quietly admitted that both things could be true at the same time. Success and revenge had become intertwined, impossible to separate anymore. And suddenly, the entire Logan family dynamic started looking far uglier beneath the glamorous surface. Hope wanted revenge on Steffi. Katie wanted revenge on Brooke. And Brooke herself now appeared to be chasing revenge against both Steffi and Katie at the same time. Brooke had mocked Katie relentlessly over the Logan launch, accusing her of stealing Eric's designs even though the collection had been legally purchased. Then there was the matter of the Logan trademark itself, which Brooke treated as though it belonged to Forrester Creations, despite the fact that, legally, the company never even had an active Logan fashion line to protect. Bill had bluntly pointed out the reality no one wanted to hear. If a trademark is not actively used, it can be lost. That was simply the law. But logic no longer mattered because this conflict was no longer about legal ownership. It had become emotional warfare between sisters who had spent years competing for validation, attention, power, and love. What truly seemed to haunt Brooke, though, was Katie's success. The Logan launch had been a massive hit, and when Brooke visited afterward, likely expecting to diminish Katie's moment, the conversation took a sharp and deeply personal turn. Katie looked directly at Brooke and acknowledged that she would always be iconic, but then she added something Brooke clearly was not prepared to hear. Katie declared that there was now a new Logan people would be talking about, and this time it was her. The words may have sounded arrogant, even obnoxious, but they landed with devastating force because Brooke had spent years speaking to Katie in similarly dismissive ways. It was the kind of emotional retaliation only siblings truly know how to inflict. And despite Brooke's outward confidence, Katie's words clearly burrowed deep into her mind afterward. Because no matter how much Brooke complained that Bill had handed Katie the company, one painful truth remained impossible to ignore. Katie owned Logan outright. It belonged to her completely. Brooke, on the other hand, was still just an employee collecting a paycheck at Forrester Creations. And perhaps that was the real reason Brooke suddenly wanted to become co-CEO. Maybe this was not only about protecting Hope. Maybe Brooke desperately needed to prove she was still the most powerful Logan sister in the room. By standing beside Ridge as co-CEO of a global fashion empire, Brooke would instantly eclipse Katie's success and reclaim the spotlight she feared she was losing. As the pressure mounted, Brooke began using every weapon in her arsenal to convince Ridge to support her. Her confidence suggested she truly believed she could manipulate him into making the impossible happen, and Ridge, caught between loyalty, love, and family, appeared dangerously close to folding under that pressure. He prepared to speak with Steffi, even as Liam warned Hope that Steffi would be furious once she realized Brooke was trying to take her position. But Hope barely cared about the damage being caused anymore. Liam begged her to stop before everything spiraled further out of control, and even encouraged her to come work at Spencer instead, hoping to remove her from the chaos entirely. Yet Hope remained convinced Brooke could force Ridge to hand her everything she wanted. The problem was that neither Brooke nor Hope seemed to fully understand the reality standing in their way. Longtime viewers remembered all too well what happened years earlier when Ridge fired Steffi over Brooke-related drama involving a leaked video. At the time, Ridge wrongly believed Steffi had betrayed Brooke, only to later discover Steffi had been innocent all along. That painful betrayal changed the power structure inside Forrester forever, because Taylor Hayes responded by giving all of her Forrester shares to Steffi, ensuring Ridge would never again have the power to push his daughter out of the company so easily. That single decision permanently reshaped the balance of power within Forrester Creations. With Taylor's shares and additional shares later acquired from Bill, Steffi ended up owning 37.5% of the company, the exact same amount owned by Eric himself. Together, Steffi and Eric controlled a staggering 75% of the entire corporation. Ridge only held 20%, while Thomas Forrester possessed the remaining 5%. Which meant that despite all Brooke's confidence and Ridge's emotional vulnerability, Ridge simply did not have the authority to remove Steffi and replace her with Brooke. The only possible way Brooke's dream could become reality would be if Steffi voluntarily stepped aside or if Eric chose to side with Ridge and vote against his own granddaughter. And that possibility opened an entirely new layer of tension, because Brooke might now attempt to manipulate Eric the same way she had manipulated Ridge. The thought alone carried dangerous echoes of past family betrayals that nearly destroyed Forrester before. Donna, meanwhile, could quickly become a major obstacle if she realized Brooke was attempting to pressure her husband into supporting the takeover. Donna might not appreciate Brooke manipulating Eric for personal gain, especially after everything the family had already endured when Ridge previously tried to push Eric out of power. The emotional scars from that period never fully healed, and now history seemed poised to repeat itself in an even uglier form. And the fallout would not stop with the Forrester family. Daphne Rose, one of Steffi's closest allies, could become another major complication if Brooke somehow succeeded in sidelining Steffi. Daphne's loyalty to Steffi ran deep, and if she viewed Brooke's move as a betrayal, she could retaliate by shutting down her fragrance line entirely and pulling support away from the company. That kind of financial and public relations disaster could fracture Forrester even further, especially if Carter ultimately chose to side with Steffi and Daphne rather than Brooke and Ridge. Suddenly, what looked like a simple leadership dispute threatened to destabilize the entire company from within. And at the center of it all stood Steffi, who would almost certainly recognize how suspicious the timing truly was. The moment she shelved hope for the future to make room for Eric's couture line, Brooke suddenly demanded co-CEO status. To Steffi, the connection would be painfully obvious. This was not coincidence. This was retaliation disguised as corporate restructuring. Ridge himself might eventually realize it too and return to Brooke with the question hanging heavily between them. Did Hope push her into this? Because beneath all the business talk and power plays, the ugly truth remained impossible to ignore. Hope had manipulated Brooke into making this move, and Brooke's own jealousy toward Katie and anger toward Steffi made her vulnerable enough to fall right into the trap. As the storm continued building, the future of Forrester Creations suddenly felt terrifyingly uncertain. Hope's plan had already started poisoning relationships from the inside, threatening not only the company itself, but also Brooke and Ridge's marriage. Every decision now carried emotional landmines beneath it, and the selfish chaos surrounding Hope seemed to spread into every room she entered. Ironically, Katie might eventually realize bringing Hope to Logan could unleash that same instability into her own company as well. And if Steffi discovered that Hope had actively manipulated Brooke into launching this attempted coup, there was every possibility she would retaliate immediately by firing Hope altogether. In many ways, it would be the ultimate consequence for all the scheming and emotional manipulation that had spiraled out of control. As for Brooke, her actions carried a painful layer of hypocrisy she could no longer hide from. After mocking Katie for receiving Logan from Bill, Brooke was now essentially demanding to be handed power at Forrester herself. Revenge, jealousy, ambition, and insecurity had all become tangled together so tightly that no one involved could clearly separate one emotion from another anymore. And that is what made this entire storyline feel so explosive, because underneath the glamour, the romance, and the fashion empire, this was no longer just a business battle. It was a family war waiting to erupt. The pressure inside Forrester Creations only intensified as the quiet tension finally began to break through its polished surface. Steffi could already sense something was wrong long before anyone said it out loud, because experience had taught her that in a place like this, silence was never peace, it was preparation. The timing of Brooke's sudden demand to become co-CEO lingered in Steffi's mind like a warning bell she could not ignore, especially after she had just made the difficult decision to shelve hope for the future. Every instinct she had told her this was not coincidence, and the more she examined it, the more it felt like a coordinated emotional retaliation rather than a professional proposal. When Ridge finally came to speak with her, Steffi's reaction was not immediate anger, but something colder, calculated disbelief wrapped in disappointment. She listened carefully, but every word Ridge spoke only reinforced her suspicion that he was being pulled into something far bigger than he realized. And beneath her controlled expression, Steffi was already preparing for a battle she knew would not stay contained inside boardroom walls for long. Elsewhere, Ridge stood at a crossroads that felt heavier than anything he had faced in years. Brooke's words still echoed in his mind, not because they were persuasive on their own, but because they were wrapped in decades of shared history, emotional scars, and unresolved attachment. He could feel how easily Brooke could blur the line between love and manipulation, especially when she believed she was fighting for something she deserved. Yet this time, the stakes were no longer just personal. They were structural, legal, and deeply political within the Forrester empire. Ridge understood, perhaps more clearly than Brooke did, that Steffi was not someone who could simply be pushed aside through emotional pressure or nostalgia. And still he hesitated, caught between the woman who had been part of his life for so long and the daughter who now held undeniable power inside the company. Every step forward felt like it could fracture something permanently, and Ridge hated the realization that no decision he made would come without consequence. As this internal storm unfolded, Eric Forrester himself became the silent axis around which everything was turning. His influence remained powerful even when he was not directly involved in the conflict, and that made him a target whether he wanted to be or not. Brooke, aware of this, began to consider whether Eric could be swayed into supporting Ridge's vision, or whether his loyalty to Steffi would hold firm under pressure. But Eric was not someone easily manipulated, especially not when he sensed history repeating itself in dangerous ways. He had seen what happened when internal family conflicts turned into corporate power struggles before, and he knew exactly how quickly love and loyalty could transform into division and regret. If Brooke attempted to pull him into the conflict, it would not be without risk because Eric had his own boundaries, and once crossed, they were not easily repaired. And somewhere beneath the surface, even Donna could feel the tension building around her husband, quietly worried that Brooke's ambition was dragging everyone toward another devastating collapse. Meanwhile, Hope's role in all of this continued to grow more complicated as her confidence clashed with the reality she refused to fully acknowledge. She believed she was driving a necessary correction inside the industry, convinced that Steffi's decisions had been unfair and personal rather than professional. But what Hope failed to see was how quickly her desire for justice had transformed into something far more destabilizing. Liam's warnings were no longer gentle suggestions, but urgent attempts to stop a chain reaction that was already in motion. Yet hope, blinded by frustration and the validation she believed she deserved, continued to trust that Brooke would deliver the outcome she wanted. In her mind, this was not chaos. It was correction. But every move she influenced through Brooke only tightened the knot around relationships she could not afford to lose, especially with Ridge and the fragile balance inside Forrester Creations. And the more she pushed, the closer she came to triggering consequences she had never truly considered. Back at the center of it all, Brooke began to realize that what she had initiated might not be as controllable as she had imagined. The confidence she carried into her conversation with Ridge started to fracture as she saw hesitation in his response. And that hesitation carried weight she could not easily dismiss. For the first time, Brooke was forced to confront the possibility that her emotional conviction was not enough to override the structural reality of the company. And worse, she could feel the subtle shift in how others might begin to perceive her, not as a stabilizing force, but as another catalyst for division. The echoes of Katie's earlier success, the pride in Logan's independence, and the sting of feeling professionally sidelined all blended together into something Brooke could no longer separate from her ambition. What she had framed as a bold leadership move was slowly revealing itself as something far more personal and far more dangerous. Because once personal emotion enters a corporate battlefield like Forrester Creations, it rarely leaves without leaving damage behind. And as all of these threads tightened simultaneously, one truth became impossible to ignore. Nothing inside this world was isolated anymore. Every decision rippled outward, connecting Brooke's ambition, Hope's frustration, Katie's independence, Steffi's authority, and Ridge's uncertainty into a single unstable structure. The future of Forrester Creations no longer depended on one meeting or one vote, but on whether any of these people could separate emotion from strategy long enough to stop the collapse they were all unknowingly building together. Yet with pride on one side, revenge on another, and love tangled in between, that seemed increasingly unlikely. The stage was now fully set for a confrontation that would not only decide leadership inside a fashion empire, but potentially redefine every relationship tied to it. And as the storm finally reached its breaking point, it became clear that what was coming next would change everything in ways no one was fully prepared to face.